I hear often from people, so I'm trying to disciple this teenager, but they're putting up walls in front of me. They seem to be antagonistic towards the gospel. How can I continue to share the good news of Jesus with them without completely blowing up a conversation because they're so against it? And one of the most powerful ways to do that is to pray the gospel. I'll give you an example. So let's say this teenager is quite rebellious and you're trying to disciple them and you're not having a lot of success sharing the gospel, but it's still appropriate in America, even amidst all the cultural upheaval, it's still appropriate to pray before a meal. And you can get pretty much any eye-rolling, rebellious teenager to do that. They'll at least give you 30 seconds to a minute to pray before a meal. Now, this is my encouragement to you, what to do in that situation. You should thank God for all of the things that he's given you and pray the regular evangelical before prayer meal, right? You can do that sometimes, but here's a little twist, and here's what I encourage you to do if they're not open to the gospel. Pray the gospel before that meal. This is what it looks like. You have 30 seconds to a minute, their undivided attention, and you can say things like this: God, I thank you for what you've done for me through the perfect life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus on my behalf. All of my hope in being good, in being righteous before you, rests in what Jesus has done and the fact that it applies to me through faith. You can say that. You can teach good doctrine. You can teach good theology through prayer. You don't always have to feel this pressure to sit down a teenager and say, you know what, we're going to spend 5 minutes where I'm going to teach you something about the Bible. You don't have to do that. You can do that through prayer. You can thank God for these truths. You can thank God for what he's done for you through this doctrine that we get from the New Testament and Old Testament through prayer. And what you're going to find is you're going to be able to throw out a lot more seed into the life of that teenager that may seem antagonistic towards the gospel through these prayers. So I want to encourage you in that. You've got something that they're struggling with, identity, who they are, who God created them to be. You can pray about that with them. You don't have to sit them down and stare them in the eye and say, you have to give me 3 minutes of your undivided attention. You can pray that over them. This also goes beyond discipling teenagers to evangelizing your family. You got a troubled family, you're with them Thanksgiving or Christmas. Again, it's still appropriate in our context to pray before a meal. You got 1 minute with those family members you know that are antagonistic towards the gospel, agnostic, atheistic, whatever. You know you've got a minute to share good, true words with them in prayer, so take advantage of it. Talk about what Jesus has done. Talk about how our hope as Christians is not based upon what we do, but what Christ has done. We are saved by works, but not our own. We're saved by the works of Christ. You can say that in a prayer, and they can hear the good news. And I promise you this, God's word promises us that his word will never return void. If you fill your prayers with the teenager you're trying to disciple or the family member you have that's off on whatever crazy path, if you fill those prayers with God's word, it will not return void. The Spirit of God blesses powerful prayer, so you can do that.